Now, if you're someone struggling with your iron striking, maybe hitting a few flats, ground first and fins, those kind of ideas, what I want you to do is have a little think about the loft you might be controlling or using and how it can affect your strike. Let me show you what I mean. So the last shot, I'm hitting a pretty strong lofted 7-iron. I presented 30 degrees of loft at impact, and you can see the strikes towards the bottom of the face. Now let's think about what loft might do to your strike, let alone only your shots, as in how high they go, distance they go, and even shapes you might hit. So if you think about my club hitting the ground, if I was leaning the club back, adding loft, look what that does to the leading edge of the club. It moves it off the ground, making it very hard for me to get the ball struck up in the middle, say up to the 4th groove-ish around on your iron. It's going to be around the bottom 2 a lot. Vice versa, if I have a little bit of handle lean and I don't have the face pointing to the right, I have it turned in slightly, so I've got my face where I want it in relationship to hitting the ball to target. Look how that interaction with the ground might change. Certainly reference strike point. So let me just hit a second shot here where I try and use my more handle leaning forward strike to try and get the ball up the face. So you can see quite a different flight, different distances, slightly different shape as well. So it's still in the low side, but it's certainly 2 grooves further up the face, and I would get that higher with a few more hits. And we're now presenting 22 degrees of loft, which makes me feel almost like that's as low as that strike's going to be within reason. And what I'm doing there is I'm playing with how much loft I put on the club, and I'm doing that by playing with this angle, so how much it's turning around the axis of the shaft, as well as if I'm leaning it forward or back. And they're kind of related, and can be for many golfers. It's a pattern that often people bunch into one. They kind of play off each other. Let me do a couple of ideas. I'm going to point the club face around 20 degrees left. I'm going to address it as if I'm hitting a straight shot, so my grip is relative to as if that face was pointing straight. So in effect, I'm gripping a closed club, a club pointing left. And now the idea of this game is to try and not hit the ball left. It's got to try and start right of this line in front of me. Now what happens, I've got it moving out to the right, and if we just show you the dynamics of that hit, it's helped me move that strike up the face yet again. And again, we're reducing the loft, helping to move that strike up. The safety net out on the course that might make you not realise you're doing this or not as well. If you think about it, if you take a bare lie, so my finger here, pretty bare lie, depending on how I'm adding loft here, it's going to be presenting the leading edge a little bit off the ground. Certainly if I start leaning that club back, you can see how much that leading edge is really off the ground. This is such a common problem with golfers who struggle to strike their irons. The other big number that's changing in there as I move the dynamics of the loft is this angle of attack number. I went from being quite level, only 1 down when adding loft, to now starting to become almost 4 down when I know I've got to try and get that handle forwards to compensate for the less lofted in that drill that I started with as I bend it forwards. So simply thinking of club faces and open and close where it makes sense in lots of people's head, I have a lot of success with golfers in trying to get them to understand if they are taking loft off a club or adding loft. Key ways to take loft off a club. For me and for most golfers, the more I turn it again around this axis of this shaft, the more I turn it this way. So if you watch my wrist angles, so the more I turn this lead wrist down to the ground, not only is that point in that face what people often call closed, it's taking the loft off, because most people won't hit the ball this way. They would try and adjust the face a little bit, and in turn now look what's happening. You've got your handle lean. Playing with the ideas of flattening lead wrists on the backswing rather than adding loads of extension in that takeaway position, really feeling like you start with extension in this lead wrist, so where it's kinked out, cupped if you like because of the grip you're using, and then as you pull it back you start taking that away. That will de-loft more than it actually makes people hook the ball, believe it or not, certainly on the first few shots. Yes, it can make you hook the ball, but people often override that temptation and start getting an understanding for where lots of loft feels like. So that high, and look how it times wants to cut those shots, because it's going to be much easier for me to try and get down and left a little bit with that while I'm adding loft to get any kinds of strikes. If I do get level like that first one too much, I'll tend to hit the ground first and fin it, so you actually start trying to go down and left to compensate for that. but still adding loads of loft, it turns my 7-iron back into an 8-iron. Where if I'm turning my 7-iron into a stronger version of itself by hitting that ball with less loft, it can be done with a tiny bit of handle lean, but predominantly for golfers, it's really done by them controlling those loft ideas. Start with that club face pointing 20 degrees left, hit a few shots where you're not allowed to start it left, so really feel like you're pushing that handle forward. Watch that start direction. Watch what happens to your strike. Watch what happens to your shape of shots. It totally changes. Then you could build those feelings into full real shots where you set up more neutral, and then you just try and flatten lead wrist on the way down, hit it to try and take that loft off, and then in turn, your hand will want to lead a little bit more through impact. Now, what I don't want you to do is try not to butcher your ball position too much. So I've got a medium iron here, 7-iron, so I'm playing it from around middle of my stance to slightly forward is my playing area. Now, if you're someone who naturally has the ball a long way forward and you are trying to add loft, naturally, this is a great drill for you, and you can bring that ball position back. But I don't want you trying to move the ball back in your stance to control the loft. I'd like to see you get better dynamically understanding how the twists and turns in your wrist as you swing it around control the loft, in turn control your ability to strike for many different situations out on the golf course, and then your ability to get the most out of the lofted club in your hand. World-class players, iron shots, they're de-lofting, they're not adding. Amateurs, certainly ones who struggle with their iron play, quite often there's plenty of de-loft, but there's plenty who just want to add loft through the dynamics of their impact. General rule of thumb, the amateurs who tend to de-loft a little bit too much, they strike it pretty good. They just maybe struggle with shape and launch. The ones who add loft, they struggle with shape and launch as well, to the opposite, higher and shorter, but they also struggle with strike. So generally, they tend to be the higher handicappers. Let me know if this helps. Next time at your range, really concentrate on that launch. Are they launching low, high, or medium? And actually play with it. Try not to move ball position too much. Trying to do it with wrist angles, adding extension, flicking forward at the bottom, see it go high, and watch how you fin it and fat it. Then really taking lead wrist extension out, almost trying to bow it and drive forwards and see what happens to shape, strike, and direction. And then play with those two feelings to find your target. Let me know in the comments down below, as always, if this helps and you want to see more videos like this. Because we'll do them. Let's get you playing some better golf, shall we?